When a clown is on your side, they can be a merry source of practical whimsy. When they oppose you, it can be a dreadfully macabre scene. I've covered the dreadful side with the guide to Follie's hunt, so let's turn our attention to the whimsy of playing as Follie yourself. I'm TheKengineer, let's solve a practical problem. Follie is a peculiar frame for releasing with 4 abilities, totaling 17 discrete options. Her first is Force Perspective. Follie teleports up to 100 meters towards a surface she can see, traveling via an inky portal. This teleportation cleanses her of all status effects and makes her invulnerable for about 3 seconds. On both ends of this portal, she douses nearby enemies in ink and a small amount of corrosive damage. Not enough to kill any modestly leveled enemy, but enough to damage explosive barrels and similar interactables. The 100 meter max range cannot be scaled by range. The invulnerability cannot be scaled by duration. The near cosmetic damage is the only thing affected by strength, almost making this ability ignore casting stats. At a tiny 15 energy cast cost too, it's a very cheap mobility and cleanse tool. As for coating enemies in ink, that ties into her passive. Any inked enemy is slowed by 50% flat for 10 seconds, assuming they're vulnerable to crowd control. In addition, inked enemies have a decent 20% chance on death to release 3 orbs split between health and energy. In combination with the equilibrium mod or similar effects, this makes for an incredible sustain for Follie's casting. With a fully ranked equilibrium, Follie generates an average of 27 energy per kill this way. Skipping over her 2 for a moment, Follie's third ability is Self-Portrait. This ability conjures an inky replica of Follie, spreading ink in a growing radius. While within the inky zone, Follie and all allies, including defense objectives, gain resistance to damage. The resistance starts at only 10% and climbs as Follie gets kills within the ink. Each kill increases the damage reduction, the radius of the ink pool, and the size of the replica towards the maximum values. This maximum is normally achieved with 15 kills. I say normally, as there appears to be a bug causing Xmas, when one-shot, to only provide half the charge to this ability. I don't even want to think about how that bug happened. Strength modifies the maximum damage reduction, up to a total of 90% at 180% strength. Strength will not increase the minimum defense though, so this is never an ability you can rely on for full or even good protection the moment it is cast. The slow effect will still be there from the ink, a little protection for you until you get the required kills. Range and duration, however, affect the ability as you would normally expect. Further to duration, kills inside the inky zone also extend the ability's timer up to a maximum of twice the base duration. Recasting Self-Portrait allows you to reposition it with no loss of stats, resetting the duration only if the remaining duration is lower. Even getting nullified or going out of bounds doesn't lose the damage reduction that's been earned so long as you recast the ability soon. The only way I've seen to lose the damage reduction is to fail to keep the timer up. If it runs out, then you're back to baseline. Self-Portrait then is a bit of an odd ability. If you skip the strength, it's not great for straight damage reduction, but it still provides a very large and ongoing inky field for slowing and orb generation. On that basis alone, it is very hard to replace. If you do build for tank from it, you still need to get at least 15 kills in the zone to bring it up to full power. Not ideal for more mobile missions. Using Follie's other defensive options, like shield gating and force perspective, will no doubt help you stay alive when the self-portrait isn't suitable for the mission landscape. Self-portrait is Follie's helmet ability, granting a reduced 75% damage reduction when cast by other warframes. Overlapping portraits will only provide the highest bonus of each cast. Follie's fourth ability is Plein Air. This ability crowd controls all enemies within full line of sight, checking a sphere around you. With a base range of 18 meters, this is just 1 meter smaller than Nezha's fourth ability, Divine Spears. All targeted enemies will have their shields and armor reduced, with a total strip unlocked at 200% strength. Any enemies vulnerable to crowd control will also be lifted up into the air by balloons tied to them. This incapacitates the enemies until either the duration expires or until the balloons are destroyed. Destroying a balloon, either by shooting it or by bouncing on it, causes the trapped enemy to fall, erupting in a corrosive splash on landing. This damage is scaled by the distance fallen, with a somewhat small splash range that usually won't reach other floating enemies. While Plein Air is a very powerful crowd control ability, Warframe is largely geared towards getting kills rather than simply locking enemies down. Most of Follie's best damage options are grounded, meaning that lifting enemies high up away from the floor actively reduces Follie's ability to kill them quickly. Not only that, some of Follie's strongest options work around or fully bypass armor, so they don't benefit from the defense strip. To appreciate this non-synergy, let's get into her second ability, Shadowgraph. Shadowgraph uses a selector wheel to choose from 14 different options. You can customize the icons on these options via your Shadowgraph in the arsenal, and exercise in creativity, which I'll leave to the viewer. Tap casting Shadowgraph will summon the most recently selected option if it's not on cooldown, and defaults to the explosive barrel option on mission start. Hold casting brings up the selector wheel to change to a different object, summoning it on selection. These 14 options share some statistics. Each causes a token 250 damage on being summoned, splashing ink in a small AoE around them. This token damage is the only thing strength affects on Shadowgraph. All objects are able to be cast up to a fixed 50 meters away from Follie, again unaffected by range. If the summoned item is not consumed by the time the duration expires, scaled with your duration stat, it vanishes immediately. Nullify fields which cover a summoned item will cause it to vanish as well. Beyond those shared statistics, each Shadowgraph is a unique option. Explosive barrels can summon either cold, blast, or gas. The cold and blast variants deal 65% of enemy max health and shields as damage of their respective type, dealing full damage across the entire 10-meter explosion radius. This damage overrides armor, such that armored enemies will be hit for even more damage to make the net result 65%, regardless of their armor stat. For gas, the damage is a much lower 12.5% of max hit points. As this is hit point based rather than level scaled, it works equally well on any mission level. All three barrels also apply their relevant status proc. You may have a maximum of 3 barrels alive at once, and most forms of damage can set them off, including not only your own weapons, but also the token damage from Follie's first and third abilities. Buffs like Raw or debuffs like Viral procs will cause even a single blast or cold barrel to be immediately lethal. Subsumed, Raw on Follie requires 180% strength, granting a 54% Raw buff, which makes either one of those 2 barrels lethal with a single cast. If you try this against Demolishers in the Simulacrum, they take normal damage from these barrels. However, testing in missions shows that both Demolishers and Acolytes take almost no damage from barrels. You should reserve these for fodder enemies instead, a solid general damage option for Follie at all levels. The second option is Arc Trap. Once again, you can have 3 of these summoned, again with no cooldown, and again dealing damage with a proc. This time, the Arc Trap deals 250 electric damage, plus about 2.5% of the enemy's max health every half a second, overriding armor. As the damage is decided when the Arc Trap starts damaging an enemy, removing their armor partway through the damage cycle will cause them to take much more than 2.5% health damage per tick. However, if the armor is already reduced or removed, the Arc Trap doesn't need to override it, and thus still only deals the 2.5% damage per tick. The Arc Trap will deliver up to 10 shocks per enemy. If the enemy lives long enough to force the trap to make a 10th strike, successfully or not, this destroys the trap early. However, if you give suitable buffs to the trap like Raw, or deploy enough traps in the same location, killing each enemy in fewer than 10 hits will allow the trap to survive for its whole duration. Now theoretically, 2.5% damage per tick for 10 ticks should deal 25% of the enemy's health as damage. Add on the 4 selection procs with each tick, where each proc deals half the damage again every second for 6 seconds, and this theoretically would apply another 7.5% damage per hit for a total of 75%. 25% plus 75% is 100%, a seemingly lethal arc trap. What sometimes happens is good old Warframe jank, and I've reported it as a bug. What happens is that the 3rd, 5th, 7th and 9th hits occur simultaneously with the electric proc damage tick. Sometimes. In doing so, those 4 hits have their first proc damage tick skipped. Because those are skipped, the total damage dealt is as low as 95% of the enemy's max health, not 100%. Again, any raw bonus, viral proc, or double trap placement will more than fix this, and 2 enemies within AoE of each other will zap one another to death. Still, It does mean that in most missions, the basic arc trap alone may not kill an enemy. While arc trap is slower than explosive barrels for hitting lethal, it is entirely automatic and longer lasting in addition to its stunning effect. Barrels handle enemies you want dead immediately, while stack traps will deny a doorway for the whole duration. Next up is the Thermian RPG. This does not scale its damage based on the target, simply coming with a 5 million direct damage hit and a 3 million damage AoE. The explosion has complete damage fall off out to its 8 meter range, meaning that a direct body shot is over 5 times more powerful than a near miss striking 4 meters away. You get 3 shots in the RPG, with no means to add more ammo other than to summon a new RPG. As the RPG comes with a 30-second cooldown, you'll be unable to rely on this weapon for the entirety of a mission. Should the ability expire while you're holding an RPG, the weapon will silently vanish and return you to your normal weaponry. RPGs can be picked up and used by allies. This includes New Tenno, creating a fun twist on the coughing baby meme. It's the baby that is now firing the tactical nuke. As the damage is fixed to a ludicrously high value, acolytes are particularly vulnerable to the damage. As it is a weapon, it can also receive various weapon buffs before firing, if you somehow feel that 8 million damage isn't enough. After the RPG is a set of Amphors. Casting this grants 3 random elemental Amphors exactly like in alchemy missions. They deal 80% of max health, bypassing armor, when applied at point blank. Unlike the barrels, Amphor damage has fall off down to nothing at the maximum 10 meter range. In addition to the damage, Amphors apply 2 procs of the appropriate type, causing the enemy to take ongoing damage equal to the damage dealt, unless it's a cold Amphor. In the case of armoured enemies and a heat Amphor, the proc damage can be even higher, as the armour is reduced by the heat. Amphors come with a 30-second cooldown, just like with the RPG, so you get 1 every 10 seconds. Death Orb, taking a 5th slot, summons an ink-covered Death Orb much like the ones found in the Void Tile set. This orb spins with 4 continuous horizontal lasers and 1 vertical, and is completely immune to damage. Death Orb lasers deal 500 damage plus 15% of the target's health per tick, striking up to 10 times per second. As the lasers are spinning, enemies won't be struck for a whole second, taking between 1 to 3 hits per pass depending on how close they are to the Death Orb. Unlike the other percent-based damage options, Death Orbs respect armor, dealing much lower damage to armored factions like the TheKengineer. In combination with its much lower overall applied damage and substantially worse application via rotating horizontal beams, it is largely much weaker than other damage options. However, it lasts for the entire ability duration and can apply radiation procs with every tick, causing enemies to turn on each other rather than attack you. With 150% or higher duration, you can have full uptime on the Death Orb. You can't, however, have more than 1 active from the same Follie. Death Orbs also retain their feature of granting a pulse of 250 energy to nearby Warframes when colliding with a Prime frame. While Follie Prime doesn't exist yet, this will no doubt be a welcome solo benefit in a few years' time. For now, she needs a buddy to trigger this effect. Next is the Corralizer Armament. This turret for Armageddon missions will chain cold damage to all enemies within its 15 meter range with a half-second tick rate. Each hit deals 1% of the enemy max health as cold damage, overriding armor. 2% damage per second isn't amazing, taking 50 seconds to kill any number of connected targets, but the staggering cold procs will ensure they're not a threat to you for the entire time. Corralizer is limited to 1 at a time, but with no cooldown, letting you reposition it as needed. Beyond those damaging options are the utility Shadowgraphs. Lohk Surge does exactly what it says on the tin. It summons a Lohk Surge pedestal to interact with, summoning an Xmas unit, unless used inside the simulacrum, and granting its randomly selected buff as normal. Not all buffs are available, notably the infinite ammo and increased fire rate buff has been removed from its options. With multiple Follies in the squad, you can have multiple different Lohk Surges active at once as each is rolled randomly. Once cast, whether you use the surge or not, it goes onto a 7-minute cooldown. Universal ammo is a very powerful resupply. On cast, and every 5 seconds thereafter, it deploys a special ammo pack. While it looks like an oversized primary ammo box, it actually is a 100% total resupply of all weapons. If you have a depleted primary, secondary, and active arc gun, one pack will fully refill every one of them. Ammo will cease being dispensed if many boxes are on the ground, but it'll immediately resume when one is picked up. Universal ammo has a 30-second cooldown, so 150% duration means total uptime. You practically cannot run out of ammo ever again. Launchpad also does exactly what it says on the tin. You get the launchpad identical to the ones used in Follie's Hunt mission to replace the destroyed elevators. For players, passing over one while not on the ground causes a strong vertical launch and improves your double jump height. For enemies, merely walking into one will forcibly launch and ragdoll the enemy, a whimsical yeet to hurl them around. You may summon up to 3 pads at a time with no cooldown, with a 4th summoned pad causing the oldest to vanish early. Then we have Lost Spirit, which is Golden Instinct, but better. Unlike the level 15 unlock from the Helminth that will give but a short-lived hint as to where your loot is, the Lost Spirit will continuously jog in the direction of the goodies. While it has a 30-second cooldown, the spirit will remain active indefinitely if there is something to track. All the cooldown means is that you can get ahead of the guide and recast to expedite your search. Once it reaches the treasure, Lost Spirit will mark it for nearby players to collect. Lost Spirit will wave its arm dismissively and vanish if there is nothing to be found in the mission, despawning and going on to a much reduced cooldown. Notably, Lost Spirit seems unaffected by range and duration entirely. While a reduced range Golden Instinct found nothing, Lost Spirit happily marched off for a distant treasure endlessly. There is a seeming bug at the moment where the spirit will navigate back to an already collected item treasure, solo or not. According to Eternalism, it is both collected and not collected, so I guess that tracks. Next, the Life Support Tower is conveniently just a Life Support Tower. It has normal collision, normal behaviour. Outside of survival missions, it could still provide a climbable object and a health orb on being consumed. Life Support Towers have a 3-minute cooldown, meaning a full squad of Follies can provide exactly 100% of the life support needed to do a survival forever with 0 looting. I don't recommend that, but you can do it. Likewise, the Power Cell Shadowgraph summons a normal power cell used exclusively to power excavators. Outside of that mission type or subtype, it acts as a special cosmetic to carry around until the ability expires. As it has a 1-minute cooldown, 3 Follies can keep an excavator permanently powered with just the Shadowgraph ability, while 4 Follies can fully power a new excavator in normal missions every minute. Defense Capsule summons an Orokin-styled cryopod covered in ink. This capsule has a very high threat level, coercing enemies to focus their attacks on it. As it is invulnerable, all they achieve is to waste their time, a solid form of soft crowd control. It has a cooldown of 1 minute, meaning a 300% duration Follie can have one active permanently, while multiple Follies can make very easy work of pod-based distractions. Finally is the Conduit Key, used exclusively for disruption. On cast, it'll spawn a random key for any of the 4 conduits, regardless of whether that conduit is completed, or if you're even in a disruption mission. Except, this isn't quite true. A solo Follie will experience what may appear to be a different key on each cast. However, a group of Follies casting at the same time on mission start will be blessed with 4 identical keys, 2 of which will despawn on the ground for there being too many of them. This will repeat forever so long as the Follies keep casting in sync. In order to get different keys, some Follies must wait for their fellow conjurers to move ahead to the next key on their list. I've observed a rotation of 3 different keys in a cycle, re-randomized with each new mission, but every Follie in a mission has the same random pattern. They have the same seed. In further testing, one player in a squad did seem to have a different pattern of keys, so we were able to generate a full 4 different keys in some rounds, but not in others. This was, however, very inconsistent. As the pattern is typically a 3-key rotation, if you want to use multiple Follies for disruption, I recommend staggering them. On odd-numbered rounds, Follie 1 conjures a key and uses it. On even-numbered rounds, Follie 2 does the same. If you have more Follies, then Follies 3 and 4 also cast on odd and even rounds respectively, but skip the first 2 rounds. That way, they should be both out of sync with Follies 1 and 2. Trying to one-shot a round, as it were, relies on the game somehow giving someone a different seed, which, while possible, is far from reliable. I have only tested this for hours, both solo and with volunteers from the community, so it may be yet weirder still. But crucially, it's not truly random. Conduit Keys have the same ability duration as the rest of Shadowgraph, meaning they will despawn either by timing out or by being hit by a nullifying pulse. Casting them early won't work in your favour. Between all this then, Follie is a frame full of whimsical hostility, able to uniquely influence many missions but not completely dominate any single one. She doesn't have the highest kill rate, despite health scaling barrels, as the cast time and small AoE prohibits fast clears. She's not the tankiest, neither for herself nor for the team. She doesn't have the longest teleport, the most enduring invulnerability, the strongest orb generation, the widest crowd control, nor the most powerful slowing ability. However, she doesn't need to be the best at any of those things. She's still plenty capable in a number of tasks all at once. Atop this, she still provides the best ammo support, the best Golden Instinct alternative, and is the only source of faster Conduit Keys, life support capsules, RPGs, Corralizers, Death Orbs, and Lohk Surges. The art to Follie is to be creative with the brushes she can paint with. So now let's talk setups. Follie's defensive options are to focus on shield gating and survival through force perspective, or health tanking with orbs and self-portrait. Health tanks can also use shield gate and force perspective for extra defensive layers, it just means the health tank is the primary method. Offensively, the only building for it is deciding, do you want to have one-shot barrels and persistent arc traps, in which case you subsume raw, or you don't. Without a subsume, you can still achieve a one-shot kill with viral priming, or just deploy more barrels and traps. All are valid choices with upsides and downsides surrounding speed and utility. Strangely enough, the large area, hard control and defense removal ability Follie has is actually the least required. Due to it lifting enemies up, it takes them away from the kill zones of barrels, arc traps, amphors and death orbs. As most of those abilities override armor, the defense strip is also less relevant. With Plein Air occupying the 4th slot, it is ideal for subsumed like Raw, which wants a lot of strength, due to the synergy with Precision Intensify. First then is a classic shield gate with no subsume. The focus is to use frequent ability casting for the core of surviving, while having access to Plein Air should the enemy density be a little too high for comfort. This comes with a low strength, 40% as modded, so both the damage reduction and defense reduction of Follie's kit is heavily nerfed. Still, near maximum range gives a strong slowing field, easy orb generation, easy control. The 3 Archon mods are triggered by barrels, arc traps or amphors, making them just a little bit more powerful than the normal variants for a little extra cost. Now, if you are not in a position to invest so heavily, we can of course dial this down. Archon flow? That can be normal flow without issue. It's there to synergize with preparation. As much as Follie can generate a lot of energy via orbs, she needs enough starting energy to get off the ground and enough buffer to deal with bad luck on orb drops. The extra orbs from cold damage kills? It's just a bonus. Archon stretch? It's there because we'll be using stretch anyway. You can safely skip that with Follie's generous energy income. Archon continuity? It only makes a difference over primed continuity if you use the Amphors, and then only on toxin ones, and then only if you throw it near to an armored enemy, but not close enough to be lethal. It's again only there because it's technically a buff. Prime sure-footed? Entirely is quality of life, and can be swapped for the normal variant in a pinch. Otherwise, it's a flex slot. Catalyzing shields is likewise there for enhanced shield gate duration, but isn't absolutely necessary. I still recommend it for a shield gate focused defense, worth investing in, and it's a very low endo cost. When we dig into it, you see the core setup is just a high range, good duration, strength dumped shield gate, and no fancier than that. A rank 0 Arcane Aegis will be equally as effective at creating 12-second windows of near immortality, so you don't even need a higher version of that. This is relying on Archon shards for an equilibrium effect. Without those, swap out Organ Message for equilibrium. Likewise, you can consider swapping out Prime Sure-Footed for Natural Talent to improve casting speed. Downgrading mods or removing everything optional, we end up looking like this. Mostly as effective, just missing out on the quirks and ability duration that a fuller setup can afford you. Going back to the original, it only takes a couple mod swaps to go from the low strength approach to having strength focused into Plein Air. This setup doesn't make Self-Portrait suitably defensive, but it does hit maximum defense strip for only a moderate duration cost. If you don't have the Strength and Equilibrium shards equipped, swap out Augur Reach for Augur Secrets, and your choice of Archon Stretch or Archon Flow for Equilibrium, depending on if you want more range or more energy security. As ever, Archon Shards simply allow you to hit those higher notes. Switching to a different tank entirely, we have a Health Raw build. This relies on turning the health orbs that Follie produces in spades to raise her armor to 1,675. In combination with Vitality and Adaptation, that's a peak effective hit points in health of 77,000. Add on Self-Portrait, this climbs again to 770,000. If 250,000 effective hit points isn't enough for the mission you're in, remember you still have shield gate, invulnerability windows, multiple forms of crowd control, and if it really comes to it, your operator. This is tanky. This setup as shown is again relying on Archon Shards for full effect. In lieu of Equilibrium and Strength Shards, you can do the same swaps as before of Augur Reach for Intensify, and Equilibrium replacing your choice of an energy or tank mod. What you overall lose in range for this setup, you gain in having easier, resilient defenses, which hold up against the vast majority of threats. For those players who prefer a little more leeway between ability casts, Health Tank is the way to go. If you don't want to use Raw for the damage boost on Shadowgraph, slotting just Power Drift in, such as replacing Preparation, will put you over the line for total defense strip on Plein Air. Or again, one more Archon Shard. This way, you can keep the Arcanes for the more effective roles of massive duration boosting and a passive healing factor. With any of these approaches, you can also adapt them for invisibility through the Shade or Huras companions. Follie is almost able to run whole missions with ability casting alone, so this opens you up to hiding under the cloak of a companion as yet another defensive layer. With Huras in particular, you can combine this with the Mecha set to spread lethal status procs even harder. Largely, Follie's playstyle isn't in being the best nuker or best tank, it's in being a whimsical multi-tool, teleporting through spy barriers, handing RPGs to newbies, and playing the murder clown in a universe that's somehow more hostile to children than in Stephen King's It. I hope this gives you the breakdown on the abilities and best use cases for Follie as she exists today. There's a lot to take in here which just is not covered in game, but that's part of the course really. That's all from me on Follie, so as always, be inky, go whimsy, and fight well, Tenno.